Let's begin. I sat frozen, my thoughts a jumbled mess as Marissa's words echoed in my mind. My wife of 15 years had just proposed something that sounded like it belonged in a bad movie rather than my reality. She wanted a week to explore herself by sleeping with other men. I blinked at her, waiting for her to laugh, to admit this was some cruel joke. But her expression remained steady, almost serene, as though she'd asked me to pick a restaurant for dinner. "I mean it, Lucas," she said again, her voice calm, her eyes locked on mine. The words hit like a slap. The room felt smaller, air thinner, as if the walls themselves were closing in. How could the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my children, suggest something so outrageous? My mind raced, but no words came. I simply stared, trying to make sense of the impossible. She leaned forward, her hands folded neatly on the table. "Don't look at me like that," she said, her tone soft but firm. "This isn't about not loving you. It's about freedom. About trust." Trust? The word escaped my lips like venom. "You think this builds trust?" Her gaze didn't waver. "It could if you'd let it." I stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor, and walked to the window. Outside, the world went on as if my life hadn't just crumbled. Children played in the yard next door. A car idled at the stop sign. Normalcy continued, but inside, a storm raged. "Where is this coming from?" I demanded, finally finding my voice. She hesitated, her fingers toying with the edge of the tablecloth. "You heard Melissa at the barbecue," she began cautiously. "She and Kevin, it works for them. They've never been happier." The mention of the barbecue made my stomach churn. That evening, what I'd brushed off as drunken chatter had planted the seed of this insanity. A seed Marissa had apparently watered and nurtured until it blossomed into this twisted proposal. "You're seriously comparing our marriage to theirs?" I snapped, my voice rising. "They're a train wreck." Her jaw tightened, her composure cracking. "It's not just about them. It's about us. About trying something new." "Trying something new?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "How about we try counseling? Or a vacation? Hell, even skydiving sounds better than this." Marissa's face hardened at my outburst, her calm demeanor slipping away. "You're being unreasonable," she said, her voice sharp now. "This isn't about replacing you, Lucas. It's about expanding what we already have." "Expanding?" I spat, turning to face her fully. "This isn't a business merger, Marissa. This is our marriage, our family. And you think inviting strangers into our bed will expand that?" She crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "You don't even want to consider it, do you? You've always been so close-minded, Lucas. That's the problem. You're so stuck in your ways that you can't see the possibilities." I felt a fresh wave of anger rise, but I forced myself to stay calm. "The problem," I said slowly, "is that you don't seem to value what we already have. Or who we already are." Her eyes flashed, a mix of frustration and guilt that she quickly masked with indignation. "You don't understand," she said, standing now, mirroring my stance. "This isn't just about me. It's about us. About exploring what we need as individuals." "What I need," I said, my voice low, "is a partner who respects me, who values the life we've built. Not someone who's looking for excuses to blow it all up." She flinched, but I wasn't done. "This isn't about freedom or trust or exploration. This is about you being selfish. And if you're so eager to burn down everything we've built together, then maybe you're right. We do need something different. Just not the way you think." For a moment, the room was silent. Her lips parted as if she wanted to respond, but no words came. Finally, she turned and walked out, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the hallway. I stood there, my chest heaving with the effort to contain my emotions. The door to our bedroom clicked shut, and I was left alone in the suffocating quiet. The next few days were tense. Marissa and I avoided each other, speaking only when necessary. Meals were silent, the space between us at the dining table feeling wider than ever. Our kids, thankfully, were oblivious. At 10 and 12, they were more interested in their friends and video games than the growing cracks in their parents' marriage. But even as I tried to focus on them, to distract myself with their routines and activities, Marissa's words haunted me. "It's about trust." The absurdity of it made my blood boil every time I thought about it. How could she believe this would bring us closer? How could she think I'd ever agree? And yet a part of me hesitated, not because I entertained the idea, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Was there more to this than she was letting on? Or had I just failed to see the signs that our marriage was crumbling? By the fourth night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I found Marissa in the living room, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. She didn't look up as I entered, her eyes fixed on the muted television. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm but calm. She sighed, setting her glass down. "About what?" "I think we've said everything there is to say." "No," I said, sitting across from her. "You said what you wanted. Now I need to understand why." She glanced at me, her expression guarded. "Why?" "You won't listen, Lucas. You've already made up your mind." "Maybe I have," I admitted. "But I need to hear it anyway. If there's any chance of saving this, we need to be honest." Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her facade. She looked tired, defeated. "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe it's the years, the routine, the feeling that I don't know who I am anymore." I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees. "So, this isn't about us?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's about both of us. But mostly me. I feel stuck, Lucas. Like I'm just existing." Her words stung, but they also revealed a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "And you think sleeping with other people will fix that?" I asked, my tone gentler now. "I don't know," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I just thought maybe it would help me feel alive again." I sat back, absorbing her confession. Part of me wanted to be angry, to lash out and tell her how selfish she was being. But another part, the part that still loved her, felt a pang of sadness. She wasn't just trying to destroy our marriage. She was trying to find herself. "Marissa," I said after a long silence, "if you're feeling lost, we can work on that. Together. But not like this. Not by throwing everything away." She looked at me, her tears spilling over. "I don't know how to fix this, Lucas. I don't know if it can be fixed." "We won't know unless we try," I said. "But if you're not willing to fight for us, then maybe you're right. Maybe it can't be fixed." Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. Not this time. I needed her to feel the weight of her choices. And for the first time, I saw her beginning to understand just how high the stakes were. The next morning, the tension between us was palpable. Marissa moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision, her eyes avoiding mine. I sipped my coffee in silence, trying to decide how to approach the conversation we both knew was coming. The house was unusually quiet. The kids had left early for school, giving us no distractions, no excuses to avoid each other. "I meant what I said last night," I began, breaking the silence. "I'm willing to fight for us. But not like this." She paused mid-motion, her hand hovering over the coffee pot. Slowly, she turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "And if I told you I'm not sure I can?" Her honesty was like a punch to the gut. I set my mug down, the clink against the table louder than I intended. "Then at least be honest enough to say it outright," I said, my voice steady but firm. "If you're done with us, with this marriage, then say it. Don't hide behind excuses or experiments." Marissa sank into the chair across from me, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I don't want to leave," she said softly, "but I don't know how to stay either. I feel like I'm suffocating." The words cut deep, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Do you even want to try?" I asked. "Or are you just waiting for me to make the decision for you?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "I don't know, Lucas. I just don't know." Over the next week, we fell into a fragile truce. Marissa didn't mention her proposal again, and I didn't push her to explain further. But the unspoken tension lingered, a constant undercurrent in every conversation, every glance. I threw myself into work and the kids, trying to find some semblance of normalcy, while Marissa seemed to retreat further into herself. One evening, as I was helping our daughter, Ella, with her math homework, Marissa came into the room. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching us. "You're so patient with her," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I glanced up, unsure how to respond. "She's worth it," I said simply. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she nodded before walking away. I watched her retreating figure, a mix of frustration and sadness swelling in my chest. For years, I'd believed we were a team, partners in every sense of the word. But now, it felt like I was carrying the weight of our marriage alone. That weekend, Marissa suggested we go out as a family. The kids deserve some time together, she said, her tone almost apologetic. I agreed, more for the kids' sake than anything else. We spent the day at the park, playing frisbee and sharing a picnic under the shade of a sprawling oak tree. For a few hours, it almost felt normal. Marissa laughed with Ella and joked with our son, Ben, her smile reaching her eyes for the first time in weeks. But even in those fleeting moments of happiness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still broken. The foundation of our marriage had been cracked, and no amount of family outings could patch it. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Marissa approached me in the living room. She hesitated before sitting down beside me, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking about what you said, about fighting for us." I turned to face her, my heart pounding. "And?" She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to try," she said, "but I need you to meet me halfway. I need us to be honest about what's not working." It wasn't the complete reassurance I'd hoped for, but it was something, a starting point. "I can do that," I said, "but it has to go both ways, Marissa. No more hiding, no more surprises." She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "No more surprises," she promised. The fragile truce Marissa and I had established brought a fleeting sense of calm, but it didn't erase the tension that lingered between us. Our conversations were polite but guarded, like two strangers navigating uncharted territory. I wanted to believe her promise to fight for our marriage, but a part of me remained skeptical. Was she truly committed, or was this just another way to bide her time? One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "Marissa," I said, setting a plate in the drying rack, "I need to ask you something." She glanced at me, her movements slowing. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "Why now? Why suggest something so drastic after 15 years? Was it something I did? Something I didn't do?" Her face softened, and she leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. "It's not about you, Lucas," she said quietly. "At least, not entirely." "Then what is it about?" I pressed, "Because I need to understand." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I just felt restless, like I wasn't living fully, like I was missing out on something." "Missing out?" I repeated, the words twisting like a knife. "On what, Marissa? On us? On this family?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "It's not that simple. I've always loved you, Lucas. I still do. But somewhere along the way, I lost a part of myself. And I thought maybe exploring something different would help me find it again." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the person I thought I knew. "And you didn't think to talk to me about this before deciding to upend everything?" "I didn't know how," she said, her voice breaking. "I was scared of what it meant, scared of how you'd react. And I guess I just thought it would be easier if I had an answer first." Her confession left me reeling. I wanted to scream, to demand why she hadn't trusted me enough to share her struggles sooner. But I knew that anger wouldn't solve anything. If we had any chance of saving our marriage, we had to confront these issues together. The next day, I made a call to Dr. Harper, a marriage counselor I'd found online. Marissa agreed to attend the sessions, though I could sense her reluctance. "I don't know if this will work," she said as we drove to the first appointment, "but I'm willing to try. That's all I'm asking," I replied. The sessions were grueling, forcing us to confront years of unspoken resentment and unmet expectations. Dr. Harper guided us through difficult conversations, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the raw emotions that often bubbled to the surface. "You've both mentioned feeling disconnected," she said during one session. "But have you considered why that might be? What changed?" I glanced at Marissa, unsure how to answer. She spoke first, her voice hesitant. I think we got too comfortable. We stopped trying, and somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a priority." Her words stung, but I forced myself to listen. "I never meant to make you feel that way," I said. But you never told me. How was I supposed to fix something I didn't know was broken? You're right, she admitted. I should have said something. But you have to admit, Lucas, you've been distant too. Always working, always focused on providing. I know you meant well, but sometimes it felt like you were more invested in the idea of a perfect family than in the people in it. Dr. Harper helped us navigate these painful truths, encouraging us to rebuild our connection one step at a time. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the woman I'd fallen in love with. The warmth in her smile, the sparkle in her eyes when she laughed. And, for the first time in months, I started to feel like we might actually have a chance. But even as we made progress, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Was Marissa truly committed to rebuilding our marriage? Or was this just a temporary reprieve before she returned to her reckless ideas? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her restlessness than she was letting on. One night, as she slept beside me, I found myself scrolling through her phone. I hated the invasion of privacy, but I needed answers. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Messages to Melissa, vague but suggestive, discussing freedom and new beginnings. It was clear that, despite her promises, Marissa hadn't fully let go of her desire to explore life outside our marriage. My heart sank as I set the phone down, the weight of betrayal pressing heavily on my chest. I realized then that no matter how hard I fought, I couldn't save our marriage alone. Marissa had to want it too, and I wasn't sure she did. The discovery of those messages was a gut punch, one that left me staring at the ceiling in the dark for hours. I had been pouring everything into fixing our marriage, but Marissa's messages made it clear she still had one foot out the door. My resolve hardened. I couldn't keep living in limbo, caught between her indecision and my own pain. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, waiting for her to come downstairs. When she finally appeared, her hair tousled and her eyes heavy with sleep, I felt a pang of sadness. Despite everything, she was still the woman I'd loved for so many years. But love alone wasn't enough anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She froze, her hand resting on the back of a chair. "That sounds serious." "It is," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated before lowering herself into the chair across from me. I leaned forward, my hands clasped in front of me. "I found the messages, Marissa. The ones to Melissa." Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't try to explain. I've seen enough to know where your head is. I thought we were working on this, that we were both committed to fixing what's broken. But it's clear you're still looking for an out." She blinked rapidly, her eyes filling with tears. "Lucas, Save it," I interrupted, my voice sharp but controlled. "I've spent weeks trying to meet you halfway, trying to understand where you're coming from. But trust goes both ways, Marissa. And right now, I don't see any coming from you." Her tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she sobbed. I didn't know how to let go of the idea. It's like it had a hold on me." "Because you wanted it to," I said coldly. "You wanted to believe there was something better out there, something more exciting than what we've built together." She shook her head, her voice muffled by her hands. "It's not like that. I love you, Lucas. I do. I got lost." "Lost?" I echoed bitterly. "You didn't get lost, Marissa. You made a choice. And now, you have to live with the consequences." Over the next few days, the air between us was thick with unspoken tension. Marissa tried to make amends, cooking my favorite meals, initiating conversations, and even suggesting we take a family trip. But her efforts felt hollow, like a bandage slapped over a deep wound. I went along with it for the sake of the kids, but inside, I was already preparing for what came next. I reached out to Cole, my lawyer, and asked him to start drafting divorce papers. It was a decision I never thought I'd have to make, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Marissa had betrayed my trust in ways that couldn't be undone, and no amount of counseling or empty promises would change that. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I decided to lay everything out. The kids were at a friend's house, giving us the privacy we needed for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. "Marissa," I began, turning to face her. She looked up from her book, her expression wary. "I've been thinking a lot about us," I continued. About everything we've been through these past few months. Her grip on the book tightened, but she didn't say anything. I took a deep breath and pushed forward. I don't think we can come back from this. Her face crumpled, and she set the book aside, her hands trembling. Lucas, please. Don't say that. I don't want to, I said honestly. But I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. We've lost something, Marissa. Something we can't get back. She reached for my hand, her eyes pleading. We can rebuild it. We can try again. I pulled my hand away, my heart breaking at the sight of her desperation. We've tried, Marissa, and I've given everything I have. But it's not enough. Not when you're still holding on to this idea of freedom. Tears streamed down her face, and she shook her head. I don't want freedom anymore. I want you. I want us. It's too late, I said softly, the finality of the words settling heavily in the room. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers are being drafted. Her sobs grew louder, and she collapsed into herself, her shoulders shaking with grief. I watched her, my own heart aching, but I knew this was the right decision. Staying together for the sake of the past would only prolong the pain. Marissa's sobs echoed in the room as I sat in silence, letting her process the reality of what I'd said. Every fiber of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her, and tell her it would be okay. But I couldn't. Not anymore. This wasn't a temporary rift that could be mended with time or effort. This was the end of a chapter one had fought desperately to save. The following days were a whirlwind of quiet conversations and logistical planning. Marissa and I agreed to tell the kids together, a task that weighed heavily on both of us. When the moment came, we sat them down in the living room, their innocent faces filled with curiosity. Your mom and I need to talk to you about something, I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. We've decided that it's best for us to live separately. Ava's eyes widened, and Ben's brow furrowed in confusion. You're getting a divorce? Ava asked, her voice small. Marissa reached for her hand, her own voice trembling. We are. But we both love you very much, and nothing will change that. Ben crossed his arms, his face scrunching in frustration. Why can't you just fix it? Isn't that what grown-ups are supposed to do? The pain in his words was like a dagger to my chest. Sometimes, I said gently, fixing things means letting go. It's not because we don't care about each other. It's because we want to make sure we can both be the best parents for you. Over the next few weeks, we transitioned into a new normal. Marissa moved into a modest apartment nearby, ensuring the kids could easily go back and forth between us. The house felt emptier without her, but it was also quieter. No more underlying tension, no more battles between love and resentment. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. Marissa didn't fight me on custody or finances, perhaps out of guilt or a genuine desire to make the process easier. Cole ensured everything was handled smoothly, and within a few months, the paperwork was finalized. Life as a single father was an adjustment, but it wasn't the insurmountable challenge I'd feared. I threw myself into my kids' lives, attending every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher meeting. The house, once filled with memories of a shared life, became a sanctuary for new traditions. Movie nights, pancake Sundays, and backyard campouts. Marissa remained a presence in their lives, and I respected her effort to stay involved. We were cordial when we crossed paths, but our interactions were brief and centered solely on the kids. The pain of our shared history lingered, but it dulled with time. Months turned into a year, and slowly, I began to rediscover myself. I joined a local running group, reconnected with old friends, and even picked up woodworking, a hobby I'd abandoned long ago. These small steps brought a sense of fulfillment I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while dropping the kids off at Marissa's apartment, I noticed something different. She looked lighter, more at peace. How are you? I asked, the question genuine. She smiled, a small, bittersweet smile. I'm learning to be okay, she said. And you? I think I'm doing the same, I replied. For the first time, there was no bitterness between us, only a mutual understanding that we had both played our parts in what had happened. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a step toward closure. As the seasons changed, so did I. I found joy in the little things. A morning run, a quiet cup of coffee, a night spent building a new bookshelf. My world, once defined by the boundaries of my marriage, expanded. I wasn't just a husband or a father anymore. I was Lucas, a man rediscovering his own worth. A year after the divorce, I met someone new. Her name was Clara, and she was everything I hadn't realized I needed. We met at a local community event, bonding over a shared love of books and a mutual disdain for small talk. She was kind, intelligent, and most importantly, honest. Our relationship was slow and deliberate, built on a foundation of mutual respect and openness. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen, not as a provider, not as a father, but as a person. Looking back, the pain of my marriage ending was undeniable, but it was also a catalyst for growth, a chance to rebuild my life on my terms. Marissa's betrayal had broken me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I came out of the experience stronger, more self-aware, and ready to embrace whatever life had in store. And as I stood on the porch, watching Clara and the kids laughing in the yard, I realized something I hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life worth living.